story no one. The day we moved into the old house on Maple Lane, it seemed like a dream come true. Spacious rooms, a massive yard, and the kind of charm you only find in homes from another era. But the basement was another story entirely. It was dark, damp, and unwelcoming, with a single bare light bulb casting eerie shadows on the cold stone walls. We never had a reason to go down there, but that changed one stormy night when the power went out. Armed with a flashlight, I descended the creaky wooden stairs to check the breaker. Halfway down, I felt it. An unnatural cold that seemed to cling to my skin, far colder than it should have been. As I reached the bottom, I noticed something odd. Faint scratches on the walls, as if someone, or something, had been desperately trying to claw their way out. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I heard a low, guttural whisper from the far corner of the room. "You shouldn't be here." My heart froze. When the light returned, the corner was empty. But the shadow seemed to move. I bolted upstairs, and to this day I can't shake the feeling that something was down there. Something that never wanted to be found. Story No. 2. It all started when we inherited my grandfather's old farmhouse. The place was rustic, full of character, but it had one rule. Never go into the basement. My grandfather never explained why, only muttered, "Some doors are better left unopened." At first we honoured his wish, but curiosity has a way of creeping in. One evening, as we settled into the living room, we heard a tapping. A faint rhythmic tapping coming from below. It was almost imperceptible, but once you noticed it, it was impossible to ignore. My husband shrugged it off as an old house settling, but I couldn't. Days passed, and the tapping grew louder, more insistent, like it was begging for attention. Finally, I gave in. Armed with a flashlight and a heavy dose of apprehension, I unlocked the basement door and stepped into the darkness. The air was heavy, damp, and carried an unmistakable metallic tang. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw it. An old, rusted metal door bolted shut with chains. The tapping was louder now, coming from behind the door. I froze. Then, suddenly, the chains rattled violently, and a voice, guttural and desperate, screamed, "Let me out!" I ran faster than I ever had in my life, slamming the basement door shut behind me. That night, I locked it and nailed it shut for good measure. The tapping stopped after that. But I could never shake the feeling that whatever was behind that door is still waiting, hoping someone else will be foolish enough to set it free. Story No. 4. When my fiancé and I moved into our first home together, we were excited to start a new chapter. It was a quaint little house with a lot of charm, but there was one feature we both found unsettling: a basement door at the end of a narrow hallway that seemed out of place. Unlike the rest of the house, which felt bright and airy, the basement door exuded a heavy, almost oppressive presence. For weeks we ignored it, focusing on unpacking and settling in. But one evening, while I was home alone, I heard it. The distinct creak of the basement door slowly opening. My heart stopped. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down the hallway, my footsteps barely making a sound. When I reached the door, it was ajar, revealing a pitch-black staircase leading down. Against my better judgment, I turned on the flashlight on my phone and descended. The smell of damp earth grew stronger with each step, and the air felt colder. At the bottom, I found what looked like an old root cellar, filled with cobwebs and forgotten junk. But then, I saw it. A child's rocking horse, placed eerily in the centre of the room, slowly rocking back and forth as if someone had just left. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's when I heard a soft giggle, echoing from the shadows. I spun around, shining my light everywhere, but there was no one there. Then, I saw the small, dusty handprints smeared on the wall. Too small to belong to any adult, I bolted upstairs, slammed the door shut and called my fiancé. We sealed the basement door with a heavy lock and decided to sell the house. But to this day, I can still hear that faint giggle in my dreams, and I wonder, what would have happened if I had stayed just a little longer? Story number 5. When I inherited my grandparents' old farmhouse, I thought it would be a quiet escape from the chaos of city life. The house was charming in its own way, with creaky wooden floors and a wraparound porch, but the basement, that was another story entirely. It was unfinished, with cold, damp cement walls and a single exposed light bulb that cast eerie shadows. My grandparents had always warned me not to spend too much time down there. They said it was best left alone. On stormy night, the power went out, and I had to venture down to the basement to check the circuit breaker. Armed with a flashlight, I descended the creaky wooden stairs. The air was damp and heavy, and the beam of light barely pierced the darkness. As I approached the breaker box, I heard a tinkly tapping sound coming from the far corner of the room. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I called out, half hoping it was just my imagination. The tapping stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt almost alive. Then, as I reached for the circuit breaker, I heard a whisper, so faint I could barely make it out. It was a child's voice, murmuring, "Help me." The hairs on my neck stood on end. I swung the flashlight toward the corner, and that's when I saw it. A small figure, hunched and shrouded in darkness. Its face was pale, eyes hollow, and it reached out a bony hand toward me. I screamed, tripping over a stack of boxes as I scrambled back up the stairs. I locked the basement door and called a friend to stay with me that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just a trick of the mind, born of exhaustion and fear. But when I went back to the basement in daylight, I found something that made my blood run cold. Tiny footprints in the dust, leading to and from the corner. I haven't been back to the farmhouse since. I'll never forget the voice, the figure, or the unshakable feeling that whatever was in that basement is still waiting.